Is that better? Can you, what? Oh, okay, good. This isn't quite high enough. Well, not all of you made it to the pet blessing, the blessing of the animals yesterday. A few did, but so what I did is I decided to fill in a little story since you missed the actual blessing. It seems as though there was a lady, and she had a beautiful little dog, and the dog died. And so she couldn't accept it. She was just hysterical. And she grabbed it up and went running to the vet. The vet looked at it and said, I feel very sure that the dog is deceased. And she said, it can't be, it can't be. And she just went on and on. She said, don't you have any way, a better way to check it? And he said, well, yes. And so he opened a door, and a cat came out. And the cat sniffed all around the little dog and shook its head a little bit and went back. And he said, what can I say? And she said, I'm not satisfied with that. Isn't there anything else you can do? And he opened another door, and this beautiful Labrador retriever came out and took his nose and was nudging and nudging and nudging, and finally just did like that and walked back in. So finally she gave up and said, well, I guess there's nothing that can be done. Said, what is my bill? And he said, $440. And she said, what? She went into shock. $440. He said, yes, the office fee was just $40, but then there's the CAT scan and the lab test. Got to allow for everything. I wanted to talk about setting your course. And then I put a little note under there, giving power to your intent. Do you know life is really, really a journey? And a lot depends in somewhere along the way of how we react to that truth. It is a truth. Nothing is ever in inertia or standing still, but there's always change going on. There's always something. It's like moving. The earth follows the same thing. It's not only revolving so fast, 1,000 miles an hour roughly. I'm not going to get into the numbers, but then it's moving through the sky at a tremendous pace, and so is everything. But when we look at our lives, the thing we have to know is that change is working its way. And when you think about it, we have to sort of get a course set ourselves. There's this scripture where Jesus is talking about pagan beliefs, and you repeat enough something over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and it will affect the gods out there someplace. And he said, no, that's not really it. He said, you have to remember that God knows what you need before you ask. Well, I've met people over the last 60 some odd years that thought that meant that really there was no need in praying about anything because God already knew. Well, the truth is, all the provision that could have been made, a way to grow food, a way to take care of every need that we could ever have is already in existence right from the beginning. It's really important that everything that every life needs is already there in an invisible form. Okay? 200 years ago, none of you were visible, right? Is that true? And now you've manifested and you're visible. But there was a time when no one, look as they might, could see you unless you were in some other body. So when you think about it, then the things that will fall into our life, there's much happening right now that we are receiving and that is manifesting in our life that wasn't visible up until recently. The house you live in 100 years ago probably wasn't, well, some of them might have been, but not very likely around this part of the country. But all of those things, the car you drive, everything, there was a time when it did not exist, and it has manifested itself. So there's some way constantly of manifesting the things that we need. And the earth has provided all of that. Okay, now let's get back to the prayer that Jesus prayed and said, the things you need, God knows. He didn't mention anything about the desires of your heart or the direction of your life, because those are things that we should pray about. Those are things that we should be intently interested in. I'm looking back in some of the jobs and things that as a teenager that I had, it would be like, hey, do you know that there's an opening so-and-so place at Safeway? So, you run down and you get the job and everything. Sometimes our future is literally hardly planned at all. It's just what bumps us along and what opens up and what we look at, and a lot of thought isn't given. What do you think? Now, here comes the good part. If you have a question about intent, and my question to you is, do you have a direction that you feel like life is going? Now, keep in mind, we seek first the kingdom. Would anybody like to comment on whether you have an intent, or if you don't, could you say so? Not a lot of, what were you going to say? I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear.
I intend to complete what I started with the master's course in education.
Okay. Did somebody else say something over here? Intent. See there? Well, we have to be, don't we, a little bit flexible. Just think about these things. Now, we set an intent, but in my case, it's a general intent. But it's very important to me, and I've written it down. I know exactly what I want to do and where I want life to go. But let me tell you how I wrote it. I wrote it from a spiritual point of view. I think that it's what Jesus was talking about when he said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. And then he had named off all these things about clothes and food and all the things that we have in life and shelter, all these things. And he said, those things will just, if you get this right, if you get this spiritual thing right, all of these other things are going to fall into place. I'm not sure I've always believed that, but I certainly do now. I've certainly taken the point of view that if you have a spiritual intent, then everything else in life just seems to sort of work out. Now, it's like a ship or an airplane that has a destination, but there are adjustments made all along the way. When I think, you wouldn't think now, at my age, that you would still be looking at the future as though all of your future was still in front of you. But I certainly do. I look at it that way. And I look at it very important. And I've had some things happen that sort of, in my mind, created a little trauma. And so I've been making some adjustments to allow for that. And for example, a person that's been with me 21 years and is so smart, I love him. He probably does more than the 7 children that I have all put together. But he's worked for me, like I said, 21 years. And then recently he told me, he said, in 6 months, he said, I'm going to night school to get my license to be in air conditioning, and I'm going to go into that field. Well, I started immediately making adjustments. I've just recently sold the house next door to me because I'm thinking, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put more cash and have less houses, and I've got the one for sale down in Waco. So I'm sort of gathering things together, and then he comes to me and says, Glenn, he said, I've really thought this thing over. And he said, I'm going to stay with you and just do this part-time as things come up. And I'm saying, well, do you know, another little zig and a zag, but adjustments is what we make. And I thought about it at the time. It's really time to retire. Do you know, here's my situation. If I weren't the boss, do you know what I would do? I would fire me immediately because I don't want any 80-year-old man walking around on my job. True story. Now, getting back to the journey. It takes interesting turns, and I will guarantee that in your life, there's been some fascinating turns. Just nod a little bit. You don't have to raise a hand, but nod. Has there been interesting circumstances and twists and turns? Maybe some of you have lived a sort of straight course, but believe me, I haven't. I've really learned a lot probably more from my errors than I have from the things I got right. Now, I don't know why that is, but it's certainly in my case, it's been right. Those were the real lessons that I learned that I will never forget, is those errors that I made along the way. And in unity, learning that you set an intent, this is different really than just goals, which, I'd been going to hear positive thinkers before that, but then that was good too. It was all good information. But to think that a spiritual intent sort of sets us out. And the one I write down, I look at it every day. When I get up in the morning and start my meditation, I have it right there. I can see it. All I need is a little light on, and I can see it. But it refers to the abundance that I wish to experience in every area of life. And I intend to be at one with this. Do you see? In other words, I won't go into the whole thing because it's like repeating, but it covers everything, including experiencing joy and happiness. Because unlike a lot of ministries or doctrine of churches, I don't believe that we were here to suffer. I don't believe that we're here to struggle. I believe that we're here to thrive. Which do you think best represents, like if you are expressing God, suffering, I don't think really does that kind of job. I know that it's taught. It's taught. It's part of doctrine here and there, and people do without, and they live a life. For example, monks, I'm trying to think of the word. But they live in this isolated way with nothing. I don't feel like, in other words, it's all right as far as I'm concerned of what they're doing. It's just that I get to decide. That's the thing. We're saying that God knows what we need, and all of that is planned out. But everything about the direction my life is going to go is left up to me. And far too many times in part of my life, I've just let the events as they bump me along lead my life. But we can't let events or happenings define who we are. It's not good to let anything that happened before right this moment define who we are or what we intend to do with ourselves. Because we have that rudder, the steering mechanism of our life in our own hand. And we may choose not to use it. We can certainly just let it bounce about. But I think that God's intent always was that we have the power within us to create the life that we would like to live. We have that power within us. Okay. I see life not as a struggle, but as a discovery. This is a thing that unfolds as we go, and it is one of discovery. I'm going to tell you about a trip I took. I think we ought to leave a little wiggle room in our intent, like what we have intended to become. This should be just a little bit of wiggle room, because there's always something better than we have thought about. Now, we took a trip, this is several years ago, but we decided to take a 3-week vacation, and the centerpiece of it all was going to our son's 40th birthday in New York. And what we did then, we planned all the places we wanted to see, and then we planned a trip to circle up through Canada and then come back down and get back home. But we didn't make any reservations because we didn't know how long each part, and so we just made a plan as we went along. But we had a direction that we knew we were going. In other words, that was settled. That wasn't up for grabs. But the details we filled in. This is the way Spirit works with us. We have an intent. We know the direction we're going. We know what is right for our lives. But we set the course and then depend on Spirit to fill in the blank, so to speak. And do you know that it worked out beautifully? I got to see things like we're piddling along because it's a certain day. We had about 7 days before the birthday party. So we got to go to the Jamestown, the original settlement. We later went to see Plymouth Rock. I've been close to those things, but never had taken the time. And we just had the time. We went back to the church so I could show Pat this church I pastored when I was in my early 20s. 1956, I went there through 58. And it's looking up into the Smoky Mountains. I mean, the back of it is. And then I showed her my home, which was down on the road behind. And it also, from the backyard, you're looking up into the mountains. And it was so beautiful. It's East Tennessee, south of Knoxville. But all of those things we sort of filled in as we went along. We weren't sure just how much time we could spend in the Smoky Mountain National Park. When we got to other places, we didn't know. We just let all of those things evolve as they could. Now, everything about that trip exceeded my greatest expectations. There was hardly a blip that didn't work out. And I said, you know what? This is a really good lesson for me because this is the way to do my spiritual life. Sort of have a plan, but make an adjustment whenever it's necessary. And this is the thing, that it didn't really ripple me that much. I may have cried a little bit when the guy told me he wasn't going to work for me anymore, but that was in private to where nobody saw me. I did. I suffered for just a moment, and I said, do you know, he's not the source of my good, even though it appears that way every single day of my life. What Pat doesn't cover, he does, you know. I mean, it's just all. But the truth is that Spirit is the source of our good. And sometimes it's so hard for us to not see a job or a person or something as the source of our good, when it really isn't. All of the things, if we give it time to evolve, work out, if we're looking at it from a spiritual point of view. And so it's like confirming that this body is not who we are, that we are this eternal soul, and that death will be a little blip in it too, and then we'll go on to whatever's next. But whatever it is, as long as we are working in Spirit and living in Spirit from that spiritual dimension of ourselves, then we can say this. I don't know what it is exactly, but boy, is it going to be good. Let's take that point of view, because think about the prayers that you pray. Think about the attitude that you pray through, or from, we could say. Isn't it much better to have an optimistic point of view where you're full of faith, believing in that it's all going to turn good, rather than pessimism? Really, there's not any advantage in being a skeptic. Although there might have been times when I took a look at that, but I'm saying that this God plan is for me. I may not be doing it right now, but it isn't a failure of the God plan. It's a failure of the way I'm handling it. Do you see the difference? There's a lot of difference. If we blame it on the God plan, then we're in a heap of trouble. I mean, it is a lot more misery that comes out of that than just saying, I'm the one, not the plan, but I am the one that needs to make a few corrections in the course in life that I'm taking. Do you see? Well, It is a journey of discovery. But when we are in that journey, it's a really important thing to clarify our intent. Now, following our passion is one of the important things. I think that it's things from more of a point of view of how much money or how much this or that comes our way. But when we're following our passion, there's always that possibility that it's going to unfold and exceed whatever needs that we have. I mean, I believe in it so strong that I would never, ever think anymore of doing it any other way. I might have at one time. I tried all of my own ideas. I would be embarrassed to tell you about them. But, pardon? Yep, there you go. No. I'm a good shade of red right now. Just thinking about them makes my face turn red. But the idea being, it certainly taught me that that's not the way I want to go. That my ideas, if they come from the spiritual point of view, are going to work out. Okay. Now, we clearly define intent. And this is the thing I'm talking about, because if we don't have a direction, it's so important. I've written it down. Like I said, I didn't really want to go over it again. I've read it off to you before, but I really didn't want to go over it again. But it's a broader thing of abundance, because you see, I want to experience abundance, because I believe that's what God is as much. There's no end. And so I remember in the first seminar that I heard Edwin Gaines do. Does anybody know her? Everybody knows Edwin Gaines. If you're in Unity, you probably do. And her first statement, the opening statement, now this is 30 years ago, and it made an impression on me because I still remember it to this day. But she opened up saying that in the world today, there's enough money that has been printed to where everybody could have $1 billion. And then she said, "Do you have yours yet?" And that's how she started her prosperity seminar.
She also said that if there's enough money being transmitted electronically through the air, in other words, by banks and everything, that all we have to do is trap some of that money that's coming our way.
What a lady. It changed the way I looked at a lot of things, not just that statement, but ideas of how important is forgiving, all these things that she brought up. It's amazing how that 30 years later, I've forgotten what I talked about the last time, much less remembering something I said 30 years ago. But the idea is, now then, besides intent, there's one other thing here that's so important, and this is to really be clear about the desires of your heart. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you all the desires of your heart. That's a promise from Psalms 37. That if you clarify these things, this is the thing, the energy of the universe, all that is live in the universe is waiting to hear from you. But don't leave it vague and don't leave it to chance. Clarify what it is. And as you move from thing to thing, clarify it again. And if this doesn't work out, who cares? Correct it. Do it. Making a mistake, that's the thing that people that are unsuccessful, let's say, have looked at. They look at their mistakes and say, well, I'm defeated. People who have done very well in any phase of life made all these mistakes and say, well, those things helped me to get to where I am today. This is one of the greatest things happening, is the mistake. It just depends on your point of view. But you're creating an atmosphere about you to proceed in your life. And the best thing to do is to keep on that cheery side, keep everything as some of you here have been such an example. You've been one of my examples. Every time I've seen you, no matter what you were going through, Paul, he was optimistic and cheery. I went down to Houston once, and whatever you were going through, I know must have been awful, but you were still cheery. Both of you were. And I came back, and it was just like a renewed bounce that I had in my life because of seeing it in action, the very things that I have been teaching. I'm saying he was my sermon. And I was the listener. I was the student while I was there. This is so very important to how we progress in life. Okay, the desire of your heart must be spelled out. And let me tell you what it does now. You may think that it's just words, but expressing desire creates and calls forth life force. Think about that now. Chew on that a little bit. Now, needs, remember, needs and desires are two different things. God's already handled the needs, so we don't need to go around being needy. There's languages where want and need are not part of the vocabulary. They're not part of some languages. And so what we're doing then, we are by affirming in a positive way, and we're sending forth this signal and this message in a positive way of those things which are the desires of our heart. And let me tell you this, what happens? Manifesting things that seem to be needs may be wonderful, but I'll tell you the most wonderful thing about it is seeing Spirit work, seeing how Spirit brings forth and answers those prayers. I think sometimes make things too complicated. I had a prayer, one of you it's the realtor on my house next door that I'm selling, that I sold. It's sold now, but here's my prayer. I wanted a buyer, but I didn't want just any buyer. I wanted somebody who would be absolutely crazy about this house. Is that asking too much? What do you think? I mean, why not just accept the first offer? But I'm not in control of that, but I can, in a way, I can express the desire of my heart, can't I? And then the rest is up to Spirit. Well, let me just tell you, somebody that had lived their whole life in a trailer house, bought the house, and they are just out of their minds with excitement. And it took 10 days from the day she listed it until it sold. I'm saying, whew, I love watching things come about. Whether it's that, whether it's a matter of health for somebody, because we're constantly praying for someone who has a health problem or who's concerned about, health or somebody else's, but we are constantly doing, and it is so wonderful when we see Spirit solving the problem. Now, we clearly define both our intent and the desire of our heart. We've got this ship in motion. Now, what we do now is set our course for our own special design. There's a quote that I just loved. Occasionally I look through Abraham Hicks, all the books that we have about that. And here's what he says. Your joy factor will remain constant as you are continually refining your ideas of what you want. And that's why it is so important for you to get everybody else out of the equation. I love that. They've got their own game going on. They don't understand your game. Give them a break. Stop asking them what they think. Start paying attention to how you feel. Joy will be yours immediately, and everything else that you have ever thought would make you happy will start flowing, seemingly effortless into your experience. That's a pretty good quote. I've looked at that a lot and thought about it a lot because I have seen it evolving to the truth. So, here's my thought. You are, each one, a unique idea in the mind of God.